Good. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Great. Good to see
Good
you.
to see you. Thank you. How are you doing?
All right. Thanks for
Oh,
coming.
good. Thanks. No, it's great to be here with you. Appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get a chance to chat a little bit too.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
You ready to go, gentlemen?
You sure? No rest for the weary here.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and my name is Bob Morris. I'm the Lance Energy Chair at Montana Tech, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here this fine spring morning. And I want to welcome our guests. We have two distinguished guests here with us today. But before I do that, I wanted to acknowledge and thank our Chancellor, Les Cook. He's in the back of the room there. And Les is retiring after distinguished service here at Montana Tech. So, Les, thank you very much for your service. So immediately to my right is Richard Adkerson, and he's the chairman of the board at Freeport-McMoRan. And before that, he was president and CEO at that company. And Freeport-McMoRan is a worldwide leading company in minerals, gold, copper, zinc, silver, others. And Richard's formal training is in accounting. Mississippi State, as I understand. Go Bulldogs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? All right. And
State.
also, good.
We'll get them converted before the end of the day.
I feel at home.
Good. And Richard and Freeport are also very strong supporters here at Montana Tech. An endowment from Freeport supports professorships in geology, metallurgy, and mining engineers, so we're really appreciative of that. To Richard's right is Ryan Lance, no stranger here on campus. Ryan is the CEO of ConocoPhillips for the last 12 or 13 years, as I understand, and he's come up through the ranks there and held positions all over the world in all aspects of the oil and gas business. And ConocoPhillips is the world's largest independent exploration and production company. And Ryan's generous gifts are truly transforming lives here at Montana Tech. I believe we have presently 84 Lance scholars enrolled here at Montana Tech, which is amazing to be able to open doors for that many people. And I'm honored to serve as the inaugural Lance Energy Chair, and I'm delighted to do that and to help the mission of the university. But I want to thank Richard and Ryan for probably one of the most important gifts we can get from them, and that's their time. So thank you for being here. Our discussion here is the future of energy. So I'm going to ask these gentlemen a few questions. We'll chat for a while, but we're going to open it up for questions. So I want you to be thinking about what questions you have of Richard and Ryan as we continue through the morning. And I want to start off with a little bit of data on energy, because that's my job. In the last 25 years, world energy consumption has grown by 50%. That's huge. And also in the United States, world energy has gone up 50%, also another huge increase. And what's driving a lot of the world energy production and need is that of the 8 billion people on the planet, 6 billion are what we call energy poor. So they're trying to increase their standard of living, and they do that by consuming more energy. That's how we got to where we are, the 2 billion with the energy resources that we need. And so the energy industry provides the essentials to improve the standard of living for everyone worldwide. And of that energy, about 80% of it is hydrocarbons, coal, oil, and gas. And in my industry, about electric power, about half of our energy comes from natural gas. And so my industry and Ryan's industry kind of partner together to provide energy to our customers, but we can't do that without Richard's copper. And so in the electric power industry, we like to say, well, electricity is taken for granted. But I started thinking about copper, and it's like, wow, I've been taking copper for granted. So the windings in the generators, all the wires, the transformers, the windings in the motors, in every application in your home or in industry, or even the circuit board traces in your cell phone. Everybody's got a cell phone on. Would be nothing without the copper that Richard's industry provides. So it's really pretty neat. Now to do that, we need skilled workforce in multiple disciplines. A lot of them here at Montana Tech: petroleum engineering, mining, geology, metallurgy, accounting, electrical engineering, you name it. And so we need the people, but we need the leaders like Richard and Ryan. And so what I wanted to do was first start out the discussion about, running a business is a challenge, but running a business in the natural resources is even more challenging. The business cycles come and go, and then government regulations and policies changes, and we're living through that right now. And so what I'd like to do maybe is start with you, Richard, and if you could share with the group, what are your strategies for navigating these ever-changing currents in your business to run a successful business for all the years that you have?
Well, the last few weeks, as God only knows, because things are changing, and it's like drinking out of a fire hose. First of all, Freeport is a global company headquartered in Phoenix. Freeport is a company that started back in the early 1900s, originally in the sulfur business, got into oil and gas, and then bought a much larger company called Phelps Dodge in Phoenix. And we produce about almost 3/4 of the copper that's produced in the United States for the downstream market, and mine over half the copper from our mines in the United States. We don't import or export out of the United States to speak of at all. Our flagship asset, you referred to gold, is a mine that our company's been involved with for almost 60 years now in Indonesia. It's on the island of Papua, and it is we've got 30,000 people working there in one of the most remote places in the world. It's the world's second largest copper mine, and it's got so much gold as a byproduct. Most years it's the world's largest gold mine, but we're a copper company. And then we have mines in Peru and Chile. We don't mine zinc, but we do mine molybdenum. We have 2 molybdenum mines in Colorado, and it's a byproduct. But our strategy, and we decided on this a little over 20 years ago, to be a copper company. And the reason for that, you mentioned electricity. 2/3 of copper goes into generating, transmitting, or using electricity.
All right.
I mean, you said it right. I mean, it's just key for that. And while the world's energy demands are growing, the world is getting more and more electrical. And you can just see this coming, and it's accelerating now with everything being automatic and electrical, and then copper is really key to things like developing data centers for artificial intelligence and new use. Now, the copper market, China's really important to it. China consumes almost 60% of the world's copper because of its industrial development. It's key to it. And one thing, the world's got to learn to live with China. We don't like everything they do. I don't like things that happen in most countries where we operate. But it's going to be part of this world's economy, and in some way or another, our policymakers have got to find ways of coexisting with that. Now, it's a great industry to be in because I think the future is bright. We are, and I spent I was an accountant, but I spent 2 years of my life in the oil and gas business. I was in Houston, involved in a lot of the restructuring of the industry back then. And I love the oil and gas business, but it's quite different than copper. It's in copper, the value creation is not in the exploration stage of the business. It's very rare to find new resources of developable copper. But copper mines, once they're discovered, last for decades and decades. There's a lot lower margin between sales price and operating cost in copper than in oil and gas business. So our business has to be focused on developing resources and operating them in efficient manners. And that's where opportunities for young people like you are just so great, because we have to get more efficient in how we operate mines. Our unit cost in the United States for our copper we produce here, and it's about a third of our global copper for Freeport, dominant part of the U.S. now, the unit cost is 3 times higher than cost in our international operations. Our mines were discovered, you know, before your university was created. I mean, in the 1800s. And over time, grades drop. That means you got to move more material to get the copper, and that just has to be. And so we're having to dwell on automation and efficiency and find ways of doing things cheaper to remain competitive in today's world. So that's really, you know, and I love this place. I have some property on the Madison River, and I've always wanted to come up here because we have so many good graduates. Mark Johnson and I have been partners for almost 4 decades now, and he's run our operation in Indonesia and made it what it is. But we have a number of graduates from here, and really appreciate what you do. You know, we have close relationships with the University of Arizona and New Mexico State, Colorado School of Mines. But when I talk to students, I just say, you know, it's not your parents' mining business. You know, today has changed a lot. Good to see women here. Women are an increasingly important part of our workforce at all levels. And but for all of you, it's an industry of where technology advancement is going to be a great place for you to learn the skill, apply the skills that you learn here. And it makes it more fun, more enjoyable, and the opportunities just cannot be greater. The world's short of copper. I mean, demand keeps rising, supply is challenged, and that's just fundamentally going to lead to, you know, higher copper prices. And we can't predict when. Ryan and I always have discussions. He's on our board, by the way, and
it's a lot more fun than running the place.
I don't know. I love it, but it's great to understand the differences in our business, and there are a lot of parallels, but there are significant differences in it goes over to strategy and so forth. But I just encourage you all to look at these opportunities, because it's just a great place to be situated at your age and looking forward.
Yeah, what can you add to that? Look, you know, I think Montana Tech is so profoundly situated in the energy space globally. Is a school, you know, we're going through our 125th birthday, and you think about Richard's business in the copper side and the electrification that's going to occur across the whole world that he described, and then in my space, in the oil and gas space, you know, the demand is just going to continue to rise, and that's because of the 6 billion people that are. What Bob didn't say is that 6 billion people that don't have what you and I have is growing to 8 billion just over the next probably decade. And to put it sort of in barrel terms that I'm used to, you know, you and I, and the average in the United States or the developed world consumes about 13 barrels a day per person per year. So that's what you and I consume in equivalent sort of energy. The developing world, that 6 to 8 growing to 8 billion people, use 2. And they're going to come up, right? And they're going to come up. Electrification is going to be huge, and renewables will be important, but oil and gas, coal is going to grow too. You might be surprised that last year every form of energy peaked last year, including wood and biomass. So people are burning more biomass every year. People are burning wood. People are burning more coal, more oil, more gas, and consuming more copper and doing electrification. So, you know, this you're at the juxtaposition. This school and the degree programs that are on offer here, you know, have a tremendous future because the need for affordable and reliable energy. And this transition that we've learned is, you know, people said in a transition, maybe you can unplug a form of energy like oil or gas and plug in something like renewables. It doesn't work that way. It is not substitutive. It's all additive, right? And it's just, and all transitions have been additive like that the world has gone through. So we sit at a real unique opportunity. Yeah, there's been a lot of conversation about the transition. And look, all of our business has to be sustainable. I know what effort Richard and Mark and their team put into environmental performance and safety performance. I know what our company does to make our business more sustainable, reduce our emissions, and make us a more sustainable, because none of us want to go through a grand experiment on our planet. So we have to avoid that. But getting affordable and reliable energy is probably more important to the advancement of the human condition than anything else, because you get cheap, affordable, reliable energy, then you have the wherewithal to clean up your air, clean up your water, do all the environmental things that are so important. So this school plays in a really, really important spot with the degree programs that you're getting, and you can look out for many decades to come. You know, the mining industry and copper is going to be needed, which Richard's company is doing. Oil and gas is going to be needed that we're doing, because everybody wants to have what you and I have, and we can't begrudge them that. They need to develop, and they need to grow and develop as countries around the world. And you know, Richard works in many of those places that don't have what we have, and as well as we do. So you're in a really good spot in your career, because there's a bright future, and two, and I think what the school has to offer is really going to be important for that future.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. So we kind of touched on the importance of taking care of the environment, and the Montana Tech's mission is really to produce the graduates to benefit humanity, and in a large part, we do that through the responsible use of natural resources, and that's so important. In fact, I was interviewing a candidate recently who had worked for ConocoPhillips in the early 20-some years ago, and he was somewhat reluctant to go to work in the oil and gas industry, but he said he was amazed at the focus on, you mentioned it, safety, but also the environment. Mm-hmm. So what I'd like to do maybe is dig a little bit deeper into the sustainability strategies, plans, work that your companies do, and often this is voluntary. It's not mandated or regulated, but a lot of this is voluntary. So maybe Richard, if you could expand on what the sustainability.
So I spent a third of my life in New Orleans. Look, my grandfather farmed 60 acres with a mule in West Tennessee. I mean, how this has happened to me and this exposure I've gotten, I just, it wasn't planned. I mean, I was good at accounting, and I liked accounting, and then I started getting the oil and gas business. I liked that, and now I'm a miner. And my predecessor told me when he hired me, he said, accounting could never run a natural resources company. And I said, I'm going to prove you wrong. He was a Donald Trump type, and he got real mad at me. I mean, real mad at me. But don't limit yourself, or don't try to fashion a course for your life. You just can't do it. You got to just find something you're good at. You go to find a place you enjoy working, and go in and start creating value from the day you walk in. Saying, what can I add personally to the success of the company? How can I support the person I work with? How can I take work away from him or her and not be negative about it, and just let the world open up to you? I lived a third of my life in New Orleans, hurricanes. I'm out west now, see forest fires. We got to do something about carbon emissions, and I just hate that it's gotten so politicized. I mean, this is This is not a political discussion. We are going to need hydrocarbons, and Ryan, you really touched on something that's been an education for my career, but working in Indonesia and in Latin America, and we were in Congo and Africa, and just seeing how people live and thinking about their aspirations for having better lifestyles and what that's all going to require. You know, we talk about making America great again. We need to make the world great again, you know, make the world great, because we'll all benefit from that. And so what are we doing? I've served 2 terms as head of an international mining association. We don't have that many U.S.-based mining companies. We have some gold companies, but most mine is international business. And, you know, and I know, you know, as COVID was breaking out, all this thing about aspirations for reducing emissions and all of this, and these, you know, these wild targets were set and so forth. And we've had to adjust for those. But I mean, we are in our own business. Now, copper really benefits from any investments in climate reduction, I mean, carbon reduction. I mean, because it's electrical oriented. So you got to, you know, I'm talking my book here. Understand that, because, you know, electric cars have 3 or 4 more times copper than ordinary cars. Alternative energy sources have, you know, multiples of copper in them than conventional energy generation. But, you know, we're doing things like, you know, we're working with Caterpillar and other suppliers about dealing with our big haul trucks. I mean, we have the biggest haul trucks in the world, you know, 400 tons of rock, you know, they carry a day. I mean, at our mine in Peru, we're moving well over 1 million metric tons of rock a day. I mean, that's like 200,000 dump trucks, street dump trucks a day. And so we are working, you know, to see how can we reduce diesel emissions in haul trucks. And it's a big challenge. And so, but we're working with our manufacturers now to see if we can use biodiesel, but also electrical generated things like that. Our second biggest source of emissions is a big coal power plant we have in Indonesia for our big operation there. Indonesia has abundant coal resources. They're the world's largest exporter of coal, but we're looking to initially convert that plant to natural gas generated, you know, using natural gas availability, and we're looking at some hydropower things. And so it's going to be all these things that are happening. And again, I'll just say, being right in the middle of all this in a lot of respects, it's just discouraging to hear it be politicized so much, because it's going to require developing energy and working together to deal with this problem, and to, you know, keep the world's economy going and societies growing and people's lives being better. And yet, you know, you just look at the hurricanes and forest fires and know we got to do something. I was talking with the head just this last week of Edison Electric, whose power created one of the fires in Los Angeles, and I was talking about, you know, they use aluminum high wire cables, and they keep, you know, coming down, creating fires. I was talking about burying copper cables. It's a lot more expensive. Again, I'm talking my book here, but you won't have forest fires.
Well, you know where we can get the copper, though, don't you?
We're working on it every day.
Yeah, so oil and gas, look, you know, we know that burning hydrocarbons, oil and gas, creates CO2. CO2 goes in the atmosphere. It tends to warm, and the planet is warming around that. So again, we can't afford to go through a grand experiment. But in our business, you know, there's really 3 areas. We can't leak methane. You can't flare gas, and we need to take care of what we call orphaned wells, wells that were drilled 100 years ago that weren't properly abandoned. The thing about all three of those is they're eminently engineerable. We need people that can come in and help us do that. So we spend, our company spends about $300 million a year right now reducing those emissions that we create in our business. And if every company has that kind of a goal to reduce your own emissions that you produce, we can take care of the longer term issues around the planet. But you know, in our business, the U.S. does this pretty well. It's Iraq, Nigeria, Iran, Russia, it's other Venezuela, it's other places around the world that have pretty bad environmental practices, but they're developing countries in a lot of cases, and they don't have a lot of wealth as a country. So as they improve their wealth, then I guarantee you they'll start taking care of some of those things as well. But we all have, we believe, we all have a responsibility as companies to try to reduce the emissions that you create as a business and try to get those down to as low a level as practical. There's a couple of acronyms that I would leave you with. You know, CARE, C-A-R-E, which is clean, affordable, reliable energy. The first time you have a major upset in your system, it becomes RACE, reliable, affordable, clean energy. And that's the prioritization that's been redone over, I think, rebalanced over the last couple of years because affordability and reliability is so important. And, you know, everybody's electricity charges are going up. You know, we haven't built a lot of stuff in the United States. So building more stuff is going to be necessary in order to control even our own energy prices here in our country.
Great, thank you. And Ryan mentioned the CARE and RACE acronyms to me, and I did a little bit of research on Dominion Energy. They provide the electric power for the world's highest concentration of data centers. So I thought, how are they keeping the lights on? And I pulled up their plan, and they state their company mission is providing customers with reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean energy. And I thought that was a wonderful.
The race is on.
The race is on. That's right. But okay, so let's shift gears.
Yeah, when they're starting all this data center thing, they're building them all over the country now. You know, initially the developers of the data center were saying they were going to use renewable energy for everything, and then they just find out physically they can't achieve that. So it's something that we have to work together on, but it shouldn't be. In other words,
it's in hand.
You shouldn't criticize oil and gas, and then oil and gas people shouldn't criticize developing clean energy. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's just too much of that us versus them thing, and we have to deal with both all these issues.
Yeah. You're right, Richard, and we just like to say, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. So I mentioned world and U.S. energy consumption is going up, and world carbon emissions are going up right with that energy. But in the U.S., despite our 50% increase in energy, our carbon emissions have gone down 16% in the last 25 years because we're using natural gas instead of coal for electric power. So I think there's progress we can make. So, but I do want to shift gears to kind of the more of the people side of the business. So you guys have been very successful running large corporations for many years. What's your philosophy on people, like developing a culture? How do you get your workforce in, attract, retain, develop your people? And what's the secret there?
So as I was coming up in my career, as I said, I was in Houston. I worked with a lot of companies, a lot of boards, and I developed this really strong dislike for corporate culture that I saw in a lot of companies. There was a lot of fiefdoms that people would create, a lot of backbiting. People were critical of each other and stuff like that. And so I'd come up in an accounting firm with a partnership, where you thrust your business with serving clients and getting along with people and forming teams and things like that. And so when I got to Freeport in 1989, really quickly, after I got there, a couple of years, the company had found this big mine in Indonesia, which is really the reason I went there, and was involved in all these businesses, and we were selling assets. And, we were a sizable independent oil and gas producer, and we sold those assets. So we were having to reorganize the business, and the then CEO and chairman gave me and a guy I worked with, who later became CEO of BHP Billiton, an opportunity to reshape the culture. And so the culture that we've established then, and then when we acquired Phelps Dodge, they had, Ryan, it was like an old line major oil company culture. You know, they viewed the company as an institution, you know, and not, it wasn't shareholder oriented, and a lot of structure. We just blew that structure up. And so at Freeport, and you have to divide it between running operations, where you have to be disciplined and organized and having the kind of structure to allow you to be safe and efficient and successful in running operations. But in terms of a corporate culture, we brought in a deal and said, headquarters people's job is to serve operations. You make money with operations. Before, a lot of companies, the headquarters people see themselves as the governor, you know, the overseer. And so we drilled into our people that your job is to help the operators and support them. We have a culture of where you don't have to follow lines of organizational chart to talk to people if you see a problem. We open up. You know, you don't have to go to the head of a unit like I never had to, or other people in management did. And then when we have a big problem, we would form a team to go out and solve the problem. We didn't assign it to somebody who said, "Oh, you're in charge of international operations. You got to go solve the problem in Indonesia." I mean, we rolled up our sleeves. And Mark knows how much of my life I lived in Jakarta, you know, to solve. You know, you're talking about the government issues. Dealing with foreign governments is it's a big job. So we have this kind of teamwork deal. We win as a team, we lose as a team. I said, so we don't start looking for fall guys when something goes wrong. But to be a member of the team, you gotta meet the standards. You got to be competent. You got to cooperate. You have to be committed. You have to be part of it. And if you can't meet those standards, we get people out. And the worst thing you can do, I think, in managing a company is not be aggressive in getting non-performers out of your company. It sounds cold-hearted, and really, in my own case, as I got older in my career, I had to overcome this reluctance, because you say if somebody's not performing, you need to get them out. Am I being fair to them? Being fair to them. The older I got, the more I learned that I was wrong to fight that decision of holding on to people, even if I liked them, you know, even if you like them. And so I tell our people, we don't have dunderheads in our company. And people say, well, what's a dunderhead, Richard? And I said, you know one when you see it. You know? So you end up, if you get the non-performers out, it gives the younger people a chance to step up and do more. And if somebody decides to leave the company for any reason, we say, good luck. Nicest time to be to somebody is when they leave or when you have a dispute with somebody. And God bless you, and then get them out of there. You know, don't try to hang on to them. You give other people a chance to step up and do things. So I think, when we acquired Phelps Dodge, I think they had, so we moved 24 people we took over a company that's 3 or 4 times our size. It was the biggest deal ever done in the mining industry. And we moved 24 people from New Orleans to Phoenix. they had 800 people in their headquarters. And they had, I think, 16 people in their finance administrative group that had change of control outs where they could leave. Within 4 months, 14 of them had left, and we hired one other person to replace those 14, a general counsel. And so I'm really proud of our culture, and I think it's nothing's perfect, and but I really like the way we operate. We call it the Freeport family. I mean, everybody talks about it.
Yeah, and for serving with Richard on his board, I'd tell you Freeport, if you think about how your family operates, that they've truly developed a family culture. It's quite amazing. They have people that stay for long periods of time in the company. I can't get people to stay past 50, 55 in our company, and I think they manage to get people to not only stay past their 60s, but into their 70s in a lot of cases. And I think it's because they feel like part of the family. And I think that's really what companies like ours too that operate in 15, 16 different countries around the world. We don't have as near as many people as Richard does. We have about 12,000 people in our company, but it is, how do you create that family culture? How do you create the team spirit? How do you bust aside hierarchy? How do you drill through that? Sure, we got boxes and wires that add up to people, but everybody's view is important. It's that collective brain is really much more powerful than any one individual brain. So how do you bring those collective brains together to solve the problems that you have out there? And you got to train, you got to mentor, you got to develop people, and you got to give young people opportunities to grow and develop in their career. And I would tell you, in companies like Richard and mine, you have the opportunity for what I call to be wide and deep. I mean, if you want to experience all kinds of different things and go different places, you can do that. Or if you're a very, very, subject matter expert that wants to be maybe a little bit more narrow, but very, very deep, you have that opportunity inside these companies. We need both those. We need both those to deliver. And we're the same way. You build a small corporate center because all the activity and the money's made out in the operations. So that's where you got to focus your attention and get all the people and make sure that the corporate center is not the customer. It's serving the customer, and the customer is the operating staff and the field people that are, ringing the cash register.
That's a good point. I was talking with the University of Arizona group. Somebody asked me, how can I be an executive? And I said, it was great. It was a really good question. And I said, and Ryan, you touched on it. Get your skills, and your career path may take you to be a subject matter expert. And you can have a great career that way, being good like that. And then if the world opens up to you and you can be, you decide you have the skills and the desire to be an executive like me, the big challenge at that point is then you got to have responsibility for something you weren't trained to be. For me, being an accounting financial guy, but I had a lot of experience with technical guys, reservoir engineers and geophysicists and things in the oil and gas business. But, at some point, you're going to be responsible for something that you weren't trained to be responsible for. And Ryan was an engineer, and he had to go through that situation that way. And that then these broader skills that you referred to come into play. It's one, how to develop relationships with people who have those skills that you don't have. How do you establish the kind of working relationship? And once you've been CEO for a long time, sometimes it's hard to get people to stand up and talk to you. Even though I tried, and fortunately I had a partner who's now CEO, and she and I had worked together for 30 years, and she wasn't afraid to say anything to me. And it was kind of on my shoulders to develop a relationship. Like Mark and I just had this great relationship. I mean, this guy is a remarkable mind planner. remarkable guy in managing all aspects of the technical side of the business. And so whenever there was a problem that came up, I'd sit down and I'd Mark explain it to me, talk to me about it, tell me pros and cons, you know, and not feel like, don't feel weak when you don't know something. Don't be afraid to ask dumb questions. You know, so many people get cases in their own company. When you know the person's the smartest person in the room on the subject matter, and they sit around in meetings and they're just too shy to stand up and say what they want to say. You gotta, just get over that and not worried that you're gonna ask some real dumb questions. People are gonna laugh at you. I remember when I was an accountant, I went to a training session in Houston, which is a huge office. I was in New Orleans. I got promoted real early, and I asked a dumb question about SEC reporting. And people just died laughing. The whole room died laughing at me. And 2 years later, I got a fellowship to the SEC, and I was writing accounting rules that they were all following.
The last laugh.
I wrote the first definition of proved oil and gas reserves for the SEC. I picked out this 10% discount rate when I was 29 years old, and it's still being used today. And so it's just that kind of developing relationships and having confidence and not being afraid to speak up.
All right. Well, at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. I don't know, Paul, do we have a microphone, or if not, I can repeat the questions. Right here.
Thank you very much that's something very happy to see. First, I'm Fuad, Assistant Professor in Petroleum Engineering. Actually, I have two questions. The first one is a quick one. So I want to ask about the U.S. grid vulnerability, and what's your thing? Because I think we agree that it's a little bit vulnerable right now, and what we need to do in the future for that. And the other question is about prediction. You as execs, like, how do you define prediction? Is it too many things comes to the equation? Is it guts feeling? Is it more experience? Is it skills that you develop while you start, in this executive journey? Or is that something that comes with the person?
Go ahead. I'll do the second one first.
There you go.
Because this is something I learned from my time in the oil and gas business, starting the time in the oil and gas business. So I came to Houston right when the fall of the Shah of Iran hit, and oil prices went to $100 a barrel, and then right after that, and you were talking about some of the reactions, we found out what impact conservation has on energy consumption, how things can change. And I wrote a study with a guy named Dan Jurgens, who he was just starting out his business, and we did a study on oil price forecasting. And we went back and looked at oil price forecasts from World War II on, and we had a chart that was like vintages of wine, saying this is what the forecast was, consensus at this point in time, and this is what the actual price was. And it was just remarkable about how wrong everybody was. And so that stuck with me. And during our study, we looked at shale oil, and they had this scenario planning management structure. And so when I got to Freeport, we had this pricing committee that priced everything, and the CEO was such an optimist that prices were always projected to be higher, and they'd end up using 25% discount rates, and and so I threw all that out. We don't project prices. We look at a base case that says we're optimistic about, like I mentioned earlier, about the long-term view of copper, so we want to be exposed to it. But then when we're looking at projects, we'll look at their returns on different scenarios of prices and see how they fit into the portfolio and see what would potentially add to it, and if it fails, what impact it would have. So we manage risk that way. And then another personal lesson is when I was in my early 40s, I went to the advanced management school at Harvard, and it was during the late 1980s, And that was when the Japanese model was viewed as the be-all for, and the U.S. was bad because of competition and the lack of government control or government policies and things like that. And these are the smartest guys I'd ever seen. These were the professors at the Harvard Business School. And they were all wrong because nobody foresaw what happened in the early 90s from a technology standpoint. And technology turned the world upside down. and the U.S. model of competition and so forth, and the Japanese model showed stagnation for decades. So what did the lesson I take away from that? Don't listen to smart people. or listen to them, but don't accept what they say as being the truth, because you just don't know the truth, you know. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going through a time right now that none of us know what all these new government policies are going to affect us. We just don't know. But be prepared. Be prepared to understand what's the downside risk of doing something and how to expose yourself. You may ultimately, you know, my career is going to be judged if this call on copper was the right call. You know, that's ultimately what's going to be called. I tell everybody that I can tell you when the peak day of copper is going to start happening. That's going to be at my funeral. But you know, that's just what I'm saying is paralysis by analysis. I mean, can kill a company. You set up these study groups and they study and study and study, but you have to manage risk, and you have to manage exposure to positive opportunities.
Yeah, and on the grid, I'm not exactly sure where you come from. Vulnerability mean from like cyber or just from?
No, from like demand.
Well, yeah. So we have to build a lot more high voltage direct current transmission in the country today in the U.S. We don't have enough, and you know, electricity demand sort of plateaued for about 10, 15 years. It allowed us to take coal mines out of commission. To Bob's comment, that's how our emissions came down. We replaced it with gold. We built a lot more renewable power generation. The best capacity factor, though, for wind and solar is about 30 to 35%. In other words, it runs about 35% of the time. Obviously, and it doesn't run for the rest of the time. So we've created an intermittent power source across the U.S. We have to have more base load. The hard part with the base load is you got to ask now a gas-fired power generator to build a facility, and you tell them that you're only going to run 30, 40, 50% of the time. And they say, well, for me to do that, electricity prices the consumer pays has to go up in order to give me a rate of return on that infrastructure I'm building. And that's the part that we're going through in the U.S. right now, is how do we build enough base load to accommodate the renewable power that's necessary and needed, because we need the electricity, but we have to handle the intermittency. You have to do that with batteries, or you have to do that with a base load of some form of power. And then ultimately you have to build more transmission lines, and you have to be able to permit that, which is difficult in the United States. Permitting has gotten very long, time consuming and expensive. So those are some of the pieces of that.
All over the country you go, and high wires are going up.
Yeah.
I mean, towers being built everywhere.
You've got to. We have to, as a country.
Okay, next question, please. Right over here, Dan.
Hey, Trudy. I'm not sure this is allowed. Or shouldn't be allowed.
I have a differential equation for you.
Yeah, right.
So I think this is for Ryan, but I welcome all three of you might have perspective, right? The obvious, or the largest growth in demand in our country is data center and computing center, whatever we want to call those, right? And the obvious technical solution is co-location with generation and production, like a vertically integrated, maybe even not even synchronized to current grids necessarily, right? I'm curious about the business model of that. Is that achievable in our country to have those kinds of situations?
Well, yeah, I can. Yeah, the simple answer is yes. Called behind the meter. So in other words, you put a data center or something like that in that doesn't draw any power off the existing grid, right? It's fully self-contained with what the power that's provided. There's going to have to be some of that because the power in the U.S. is insufficient. You can't hook all these data centers up to the power grid, and the power grid can't handle it all in today's form. So a lot of it's going to have to be behind the grid. The stuff that's being built in Virginia today is both got self-generated power and take some power from the grid. So it's a bit of a hybrid. But the model that can work, like look at our company, we own a bunch of we're the largest landowner in the United States, corporate landowner. We have large ranches in West Texas. We have large wetlands areas in the upper Gulf Coast. But look, we have a lot of gas. We can build combined cycle gas-fired power plants. We have land you could build on and never even touch the grid, right? So there'll be some of that gets built. But the stuff that's being built today has got a combination of probably some self-generated power and some grid-generated power. But that's what everybody's trying to decide. If you have a sustainability goal and you want complete green energy, it's pretty hard to do that to power a data center that needs to run 24/7. But the grid is slowly greening. In Texas, where I live, 30% of the grid is solar and wind. So even the people who are drawing off the grid can claim some renewable, power, but the grid can't handle all these data centers either. So there's going to be a combination built. I don't know, Bob, you're probably closer.
No,
to it.
actually, I give your answer a name. Professor Ternowski, he did a pretty good job answering that. Good. Thank you. Next question, please. Back there in the way back.
Hello, my name's Garrett. So you were talking, this is for Richard really. You were talking about that us versus them mentality, and there's also a drive for innovation, and sometimes I think those two can clash. And I want to know, how often does like a society or like a personal bias of the people get in the way of innovation, and how do you overcome that?
I'm trying to put that in a global context because one big lesson in my career is working outside the United States. You can't take your cultural biases and plug them into other countries and expect them to accept, what you think the right culture is. And so it really varies. I think the one thing that kills things internationally is corruption. It's a cancer on a society, and that's one thing we have to always fight. One of the other things I did was at the SEC, I helped draft the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which, we now have a Department of Justice policy of not enforcing it like that, and I think it's a huge mistake. So one thing is you got to understand the culture and learn to work with it, and know that people aren't going to necessarily accept your particular view of the world. It also means internationally you've got to have nationals that are part of your team. You got to have people in the countries that are respected in their country, but also buy into your corporate objectives and willing to, and that means building trust with them, giving them responsibility, paying them well, so that they all buy into it. In the United States, another big lesson I've learned is in terms of dealing with governments and NGO groups and the media, is not to get too frustrated with them. A lot of CEOs just, NGO group will come in, and they have aspirations, and often they don't have the technical understanding or the business experience in making it practical. And so a lot of CEOs just threw up their hands and said, I don't want to deal with these people. Same way in the investment community, you run into hedge fund operators and things like that. And in local communities, I mean, Freeport really had a black hat on for years because we were in the phosphate fertilizer business. We were the biggest emitters of toxic substances in the waters of the United States. And we had this, they later declassified the material that gave us that, so it was no longer toxic, but and Indonesia had a lot of controversy with the way we were developing it. And so what I try to do personally, I try to encourage our people to do, is sit down with people and find common ground. I mean, try to put yourself in their shoes and understand why they're saying that. And I try to do this in business negotiations as well. I don't always try to get the very best deal that you can get, but understand the other side and say, make a judgment, is this deal really worth doing? And, and get the deal done. The same way in talking with all these other groups is, what's their point of view? How can you establish a degree of trust? Sometimes you can't, but it's really worth the effort to try to, not always think, even if you are right, even if you are right, I was going to say if you think you're right, but even if you are right, is to not have this righteous tone where you're dumb or, project that. You don't understand what you're talking about. You kind of, to me, you got to quell that and say, okay, why are they saying this? What can we get to try to work out to an answer? I don't know if I answered your question or not.
All right. Okay, well, Ryan and Richard, I've thoroughly enjoyed the last hour with you. I think we could go for many more, but
Probably good.
yeah, it's a great topic. And again, I want to thank both of you for your time and for your continued and longstanding support of Montana
I just
Tech.
appreciate being here. I love Montana. I mean,
right.
Montana's got a culture that I really buy into. It's a lot of similarities to my southern culture, and I love this state, love the people, and I've been wanting to come up here for a long time. Thank you for arranging it, Ryan. It's just great being with all of you, and good luck to you.
Great. Well, let's give a hand for
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sure.